Hi, my name is Dean Walker. My main primary job here at Walker Manufacturing has been and continues to be product development. I joined the company right out of college and I've been here ever since, working with my brother. I had the privilege of working with my dad as well for many years, and quite a bit of what I do, I still think about my dad a lot, and he was a very influential person in my life, and I think a lot of the abilities I have, I inherited from my dad. Product design is something that I have done for a long time now and been very passionate about, and continue to enjoy it to this day. The challenges of it are many. The frustrations at times are many as well, but the rewards are certainly there if you just keep working at it. And that's been one of the things that I've enjoyed through the years, is just keep working at it, whatever it might be, whatever problem you might have. There's a solution there. You just have to find it.
Hi, I'm Ted Walker. I work primarily with my dad, Dean, in the product development side of things here in the business. I grew up in the business, but have been actively involved for about the last 7 years. Being able to grow up in the business and literally growing up in this area, I've had the privilege to witness a lot of the deck development that my dad has done over the years. I guess I took it for granted growing up that that's how you designed things, but now I've developed a lot more of an appreciation about the time and effort that goes into designing a deck that cuts beautifully. What it comes down to primarily is a lot of iterations, a lot of design discipline, the willingness to spend a lot of time on the seat of a lawnmower, on the grass, trying things.
When we got started in the building lawnmower, I really had no idea of what we were really getting into as far as the challenges of cutting grass. Most people would think, and I think I fell into that category, thinking that's relatively simple to do. But as we started working on decks, and really when you throw a multi-bladed deck housing into the equation, things change and things get more complicated. And so the ongoing challenge of trying to cut grass and do it well in a variety of grass conditions, climates, different moisture levels, all those things thrown into the mix, it becomes quite challenging. And so it has been a learning process almost from the get-go of trying to cut grass and do it well, not only here in Colorado, but really around, literally around the world. So there's been times when we have developed a deck and brought it to market, basically a deck that worked well here in Colorado, but then when we got it in other locations, we found out that it did not do everything that we were hoping it to do. Deck design in general is a compromise. There's a lot going on underneath a cutting deck, and so trying to maximize all the different things that are happening, airflow, material flow, suction, the ability for the deck to pick up leaves, all those different things, it's a compromising situation, and usually in deck design you have to try to pick and choose the compromises.
There's a lot of science involved in deck design, but it's also an art form too, I would say, and part of that is having the patience to follow through with the design. I would come home from school and try to find my dad, and he'd be out mowing, and that was a very common occurrence because he knew that in order to develop a deck that cut as beautifully as we needed it to cut, that collected grass and other material effectively, that there was a lot of trial and error, a lot of iterations involved in that. And he was willing to put in that time and the effort and the countless trips back into the shop to cut out a baffle, to add a baffle, to maybe just slightly tweak a baffle's location, or maybe to tear it all out and start over again completely. And so there's a lot of just a lot of seat time, and we jokingly say it's a good thing that we really like to cut grass, because when it comes down to it, developing decks that cut well just requires a lot of effort.
The willingness to fail. I've thought about that a lot of times through the years. Sometimes when you're debating, should I try this or should I try that, and it gets down to sometimes, well, I'm tired of trying stuff, but yet you just have to keep pushing ahead, and you have to be willing to say, well, this probably won't work, but I'm going to try it anyway.
Well, you know that every iteration is going to take, what, 30 minutes? By the time you get the machine in here, get the deck either pulled off of the machine or the deck tilted up, do what you're going to do,
fabricate a part or parts, and
make the modification,
right.
Get back out on the grass and spend enough time mowing again to quantify that change. Yeah, there's a lot of time invested every time you decide, I want to try something new or different. So it is, every time you want to try something, it's a risk. You're risking your time.
Right. And sometimes we've gone out the door and cut grass for 15 seconds and turn around and come back in. Other times it takes a while longer to determine, differentiate between what you had before and what you have now. You know, is this better or is this not better? So
the really frustrating times are when you make a change, you go out and think that you've nailed it and that it's perfect. And then the next day, the next morning, you go out and mow again and something has changed. The grass conditions are slightly different, and you realize that what we thought was so great the day before
exactly
isn't so great after all.
That's happened many times.
Those are the frustrating ones.
Right.
The roller coaster of emotions. At Walker, we're passionate about cutting grass and cutting it well, leaving a beautiful cut. And that really has started with Dean's effort over the years.
It's kind of crazy to think about being passionate about cutting grass. And when we started this journey years and years ago, I don't think that was on my radar. But it's been interesting through the years how passionate we have become about cutting grass, doing it well, the beautiful cut, the beautiful look that is left from a deck that's working well. Through the years, we have not used a lot of technology in our deck design. We have used some, but most of our deck design has been through trial and error, through seat time, through just spending a lot of time running the machine. I still really enjoy mowing grass. I mow my own grass, and almost all the time while I am mowing my grass, though, I'm not just thinking about whatever. I'm looking at, analyzing, thinking about, you know, the job that this particular deck is doing, the one that I'm running at the time. You know, what I'm seeing, what could we do to change this or change that, make it better. It's an ongoing process, a process that will never end as long as you're willing to keep working at it. Yeah, I used the word compromise earlier. As long as there's compromises involved, there will always be opportunity to get better. And we continue to work on that, and don't see that changing in the future.
One of the things that you've never compromised on, and that we'll continue to do, is putting in the time and effort to make sure that a deck is as good as we can possibly make it. And there's limitations when it comes to designs, but we don't want to ever compromise on putting in the effort, trying as hard as we can to get it right.
So one of the comments we receive quite frequently is the striping ability of our machine, and honestly, this has been something that was really not a focus in the beginning for us, but we think really it is the result of this deck style, the counter-rotating blades, the fact that the deck is symmetrical lends itself to a good striping characteristic. The fact that what's happening over here on the deck basically is the same thing as happening on the other side of the deck. That's not true on a side discharge deck or a deck where the material is being discharged and even put into a blower on the side of the deck. And that really is true regardless of whether you have what we call the standard rotation deck or the reverse rotation. The idea is that it's symmetrical underneath the deck, and that lends itself to an even, consistent striping pattern across the cut width.
One of the other benefits of this deck style is that it stripes without the bulkiness and the inconvenience of having a roller, a striping roller on the back of the deck. We can leave beautiful stripes, can leave stripes that attract attention to lawns, and we don't have to do it without any additional equipment. Lots of people ask, well, what's the right deck for me, a reverse rotation deck or a standard rotation deck? And that's kind of a hard question for us to answer sometimes, because both decks are really good cutting decks, and a lot of it just comes down to the local climate, the local grass types. And so determining the right type of deck to use in an area really needs to be done through a demo, having a demo done on the properties that you're mowing, so that you can determine what's best in your area. And hopefully also your dealer and distributor have experience as well that they can help you choose the right deck for your cutting conditions.
Our original deck was a 36-inch deck, then we went to a 42, and then the 48, which you see in front of us here. And one of the lessons I learned pretty early on was that in general decks are not scalable. What works on one deck probably, configuration-wise, probably isn't going to work on another deck. And that was so true with the 48. We'd been making the 42 and basically started a 48 as a scaled up version of the 42. Quickly found out that we had some real problems, and the problem with this style deck from the very beginning is in this overlap area of trying to cut grass and do it well. It's a relatively small area, and in a conventional rotation deck like this one, counter-rotating, but the blades are rotating towards one another to the middle of the deck. Trying to cut grass in that middle section was very challenging. And so what you see in front of you is the result, again, of a lot of work of trying to meet that challenge of cutting grass evenly across the cut width, with the focus, again, of being in the middle of the deck. Again, tried a lot of different things. This deck probably represents the biggest challenge that I've had from a deck standpoint. And we did a number of things on this deck that we have not done on any other deck, just in order to accomplish that goal. So when we started working on the 48-inch deck, because the deck was larger and bigger blades and all that, we had more volume of air to deal with. And the more volume of air and material you have to deal with, the greater the challenge of cutting in this area is. And so in order to achieve that, we did quite a few different things, but in general, the divider bars that you see, the pans in the back of the deck, we also have what we call waste gates right here, which is in order to let some of this pressured air in the middle of the deck have a place to go, to escape, to get out from underneath the deck. All those things were done to really address this area right here in the 48. One of the biggest advantages of the reverse rotation deck is that we really trade issues in a way, but this area of cutting in the middle is not near as predominant in the reverse rotation deck, and one of the beauties of it is just the cleanliness of the underneath side of the deck, the lack of divider bars in order to accomplish the cutting action in the middle of the deck.
As my dad was just mentioning, cutting in the overlap area of a counter-rotating deck is always a challenge, and so the reverse rotation decks rather than all of the air and material converging together in the middle of the deck, divide the cut material and the air individually and actually bring the material around the outside, and the material meets in the back of the deck. And so bringing the material together here in a different place from where we're also trying to cut grass in the middle of the deck helps us cut very evenly across the width of the deck with the reverse rotation.
So over time, our challenges, one of our challenges has been to try to push our design as far as we could, so that means increasing deck size. So the 48 has been a very good deck for us, but then the desire, the suggestion, what about a bigger deck? So we started contemplating a larger deck and focused in on a 52-inch size, but because of what I'd gone through with this particular deck, when I was thinking about a larger deck, I didn't even really want to go down that road. And so really that's where the reverse rotation concept was birthed, was when we started working on the 52. And it was with the idea that, again, because of the challenges of cutting grass in the middle, maybe there's a better way to do it. And I did not invent this idea, but it was an idea that I latched onto and thought maybe that idea will help us in the area of making a larger deck. We did the 52, it has been a successful deck, and because of the success of that deck, then we've taken that concept and applied it to other decks in our lineup with the idea that there are definitely some advantages to the reverse rotation. Both of these decks cut very well, but again, just looking at the underneath side of the deck, you can see it, they do it in pretty vastly different methods. As Ted alluded to, really the best way to determine which deck is best for me, again, is by demonstration, putting them on your property, your situation, and finding out which one works best for you.
We started 40 years ago with a 36-inch collection machine, but over time there's been demand for larger machines, for faster machines, machines with more capability. But through that time, we've never strayed away from the idea that our decks need to leave a beautiful cut on the grass. And so whether it's a collection deck, a rear discharge deck like the 64-inch that we have here, mulch decks, every deck that we produce, we want to leave a beautiful cut, and that's something that we're striving to achieve no matter the discharge style. Our collection decks have earned a reputation for leaving a beautiful cut over many years, but we also put a lot of effort into our non-collection decks. The deck we've got here is a DR64. It's for our Model H tractor. It's a very high production deck, high ground speed, but also leaves a beautiful cut. On the Model H tractor, with its higher ground speed, it creates additional challenges to cut grass, and especially on a rear discharge deck like this one, there's also the challenge of distributing the cut clippings evenly across the back of the deck. The DR64 was an outgrowth from the DR52, which was a deck that's been available for the Model H for some time now, but people wanted a larger rear discharge deck that had the same performance of the DR52. In other words, it left a beautiful cut, did a very good job of distributing cut clippings across the cut width of the deck.
This is another example of, again, where scaling a deck didn't necessarily work. In concept, it's very similar to the 52, but in reality, we had to do a lot of work on the rear baffles of the deck in order to achieve the even distribution of the material across the cut width. Most rear discharge decks will leave some sort of a pattern of cut material on the grass. Some people try to counter that by turning one of the blades the opposite direction in order to break up that natural tendency for it to windrow out the back of the deck. We've chosen, by putting these baffles on the back of the deck and tuning those baffles, we're able to control the discharge pattern of the deck, and the results have been very, very satisfying, very gratifying, but it did take a lot of work in order to achieve those results.
One of the other effects of having this rear baffle in the deck is that we actually get quite a bit of clipping reduction happening. We call it a rear discharge deck, but there's actually quite a bit of mulching action going on in this deck as well. And it's actually really beneficial because as those clippings are reduced into smaller particles, they disappear that much better into the cut turf.
Well, I'd say part of the challenge is not only the actual cut quality, but the disbursement of the clippings is a big deal in the beautiful cut. So that has been one of the major challenges of this particular deck and any rear discharge deck. It's a challenge to do that, and so we've worked hard at trying to achieve those goals and feel like that this deck, as well as the 52 rear discharge, both of these decks do that quite well, and we've had a lot of positive comments around that idea that I couldn't believe how much material I was cutting off, but yet the result was very satisfactory.
We've also had quite a few reports of people using this deck and also the 52-inch rear discharge deck where their customers actually think they are collecting the clippings. They're surprised when they find out that this is a rear discharge deck because the cut quality and the clipping disbursement is even. It actually, in a lot of conditions, looks like a collection machine. This is our M48 mulch deck. This is a deck that has been in production for a number of years now. Very good performing mulching deck that leaves the signature Walker beautiful cut. Mulching decks are challenging because they're a closed system. There's no airflow through the deck, and so we're basically circulating air underneath the deck, and while we do that, we're also trying to cut grass and distribute grass as evenly as possible. Because there's no designated discharge area on the deck, it can be challenging to try to balance all of those different things and end up with a deck that has good cut quality, good clipping distribution that mulches up the clippings small enough to actually disappear into the turf. And trying to do that in as many different conditions and grass types as possible.
Yeah. It is a challenge, as you say, Ted, because you want to hold the material underneath the deck long enough to give it multiple opportunities to be cut, but yet also you have to release the material in a timely manner in order to not achieve too much buildup underneath the deck. So there are many different ways to do mulching. All of them present their challenges. We have chosen in this particular deck to address the mulching issue in a couple ways. One is we're using a toothed style blade here, and then we also are using what we call a recirculator hub. These actually help recirculation of the air and the material underneath the deck to try to achieve the mulching results that we want. As Ted mentioned, the cutting aspect of a mulch deck is definitely challenging. You might think, well, if you want to get a better cut, you need more lift. But in a mulch deck, a higher lift wing on the blade is not necessarily a good thing. Again, because of no discharge, all it does is create more turbulence, and therefore it may lay the grass over rather than help stand it up. So the wing on the blade is very critical. We also think our recirculating hubs here help that aspect of actually creating some lift out here on the perimeter of the deck while pushing air down in the center of the blade arc.
I remember years and years ago, it's probably been 20 years ago when you first started working on mulch decks, how frustrating it was because in some ways the things that happen underneath a mulch deck are kind of opposite of what happens underneath a collection deck. And so I think those early days of mulch deck design were pretty frustrating because you were having to unlearn a lot of the things that had taken so long to figure out on the collection side of things. It's probably not possible to know for certain, but I would say that in the last 40 years, there's no single person anywhere that has put in more time doing deck research, development, and testing than my dad. And we're definitely the beneficiaries of all of that hard work, that time, that effort. And so we're learning from him. Thankful that he's willing to pass on that knowledge to the rest of us. And we're just excited for the future. We have a lot of ideas, a lot of things that we continue to work on. This idea of deck design keeps progressing. There's always new things to try. And this process will really never end, right?
That's right, yeah.
We'll keep pushing.
So when I think about the past and I think about the future, and particularly concerning deck design, feel blessed to have experienced a lot in the days gone by, and we are doing things differently today than what maybe necessarily I've done for years and years and years, but I'm fortunate to not be doing this by myself anymore. Blessed to be working with Ted and with some others here in the company that bring a lot of skills and abilities that I don't necessarily have. So we will continue to push ahead with the goal of beautiful cut. Even with technology and talent and all the things that we have today that I didn't have 40 years ago, though we still feel like there's no substitute for hard work, for seat time, spending time on the grass, trying something, finding out that it doesn't work, cutting it out, redoing it, that type of thing. I don't think we'll ever get away from that. That's just part of the discipline of trying to make a machine that does the job well.